Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to 19 to the Dozen, or as I like to call it, the 1912 podcast. My guest today is a rather special one. Her name is Alyssa Mendonsa. Alyssa is a singer and songwriter with an incredible array of hit singles such as Ufte Riyada from the film Kartik Calling Kartik, Kabo Ke Parinde from the film Zindagi Na Milegi Dobara, as well as Baby Won't You Tell Me, which is more recently in the movie Saho. Now, while she does have an incredible talent, she also has an incredible story to tell. Last week, she went live on Instagram to talk about the importance of mental health with the tragic passing of the Bollywood actor Sushant Singh Rajput. Today, she joins us to take a deep dive into some of her own experiences with therapy, as well as hopefully break the stigma associated with it. So, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Alyssa Mendonsa. Thank you. 3, 2, 1. Alyssa Mendonsa, how are you today?
I am great. I'm good. I'm really excited to be here. I'm super happy because I'm also seeing you after like damn long.
Yeah, it's been 12 years, so I'm really happy that you've come on. To be honest, you're like the first person who I'm bringing on who's outside of my regular social circle of friends.
Okay.
So I'm really honored to have that. And
honored, dude. I'm just a friend. Come on, you know each other.
You're a friend, but at the same time, it was really nice of you. We haven't spoken for like 12 years. So for the people who don't know, Alyssa and I were in college together in St. Xavier's College, and we studied arts together. And then after I joined hotel management, then she went on to become a celebrity. So there's that.
No, not at all. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how to react to these things when people say that, but whatever.
And it must be really awkward, right? When people view you as like a celebrity and stuff, and you're like a regular person. I mean, at least you want to be like a regular person, I feel.
But I am a regular person. Okay, so
I know you.
I am. So let me tell you this. So when I was in college, my music career took off in college, and for the longest time when people used to walk up to me and ask me, he like, did you sing, so and so song, I would deny. I would be like, no, it's not
Really?
me. That's yeah, because I didn't know how to handle it. And I believe I was a very quiet, introverted type person in college.
Yeah, I remember.
I was a little shy, and I just did not know how to handle any of that. And it was literally overnight, because everything in my music, like that initial bit of my music career launching, was so accidental. It was so unplanned. It was just like I went into the studio. I moved from Thane. I used to live in Thane. I moved to Bandra, and my dad's studio is in Bandra. And I didn't know anybody here, so I just decided to go and hang out at the studio. And they were working on a film project, and Shankar actually said, why don't you just go in and sing a few lines, and or rather record the full song, and we present it to the producers or whatever for the film.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, cool. So I went and I recorded it, not thinking that it's going to become something. I just thought, especially when they're writing a song, like you lay down a structure, you lay down the idea, right, and then kind of you build on the final thing. So I looked at it more like that. So anyway, it was presented to the director, and they loved it. It stayed in the movie. It launched and it became one big thing overnight.
This was, which movie was this? You've done a fair amount of movies.
Yeah, so this was the song Ufte Riyada.
Kartik Calling Kartik.
Yeah. So that was the first song that released, and I think a few after that. But it was so like weird, and everywhere I went, the song was on like radio and stuff. And at that time, traveling to college.
I've always wanted to ask someone about this. How does it feel, being one day just and your average show, not many people know about you, and then suddenly like you get elevated to this really high lofty area where everyone suddenly seems to know you and everyone seems to know your music and stuff. Like, it must be such a weird difference, right?
So honestly speaking, for me, I was very like, a lot of people still don't know my face. A lot of people know my voice. So I've kind of kept it that way. I've intended, maybe now after this podcast, I don't know what's going to happen, but I always knew very early on that I never wanted to be recognized everywhere. Yeah, like it's okay if my voice, people know my voice, that's great. But I always wanted to be able to have the freedom to go and do things I love, like hang out with my friends. And I never wanted to feel like I couldn't go anywhere and have like 100 people looking at me. So I never really in that sense, I was never really, a lot of people bank on a wave of success and maybe they
Correct.
make their faces known and all.
Correct.
I never really did that. I didn't really go for a lot of award functions and all of that stuff. I was invited to a lot of things. But I've consciously, I think, to some degree kept it like that. And so I don't think I'm somebody who's really experienced fame of that degree where people recognize the face. Like
Hmm.
people, when they find out about my voice, yeah, then they come up and say, "Oh my God, we didn't know that you sang this song." And now I'm much better at handling that situation. I don't deny the fact that I sung a song. I just very politely acknowledge the fact and give them a hug and indulge in whatever part of the conversation regarding my success and career and all of that they want to know. But yeah, I don't feel like it's really changed me. I never experienced that.
I think that's a good thing, right? That ultimately you still retain who you are, because you see a lot of the bigger celebrities, right? Especially in in Hollywood and stuff. Like you see
Yeah,
them, they get to a certain point, and at that point they peak, and
yeah,
beyond that peak, they seem to not be able to go any further. And it's just like a downward trend for them. I guess when you get to that sort of level of fame, I don't know about this. This is from me just observing what I see. But when you get to that kind of level of fame and fortune, and you have that much money in your bank account, and you cannot really want to, I mean, if you at least look at it this way. Okay, so when I was very young, I always wanted a Ford Mustang. I
okay.
would have a picture of that car in my cupboard, and every day, I'd look at that car and be like, one day I'm gonna own that car.
Hmm.
And then I would, and basically the idea behind it is that you struggle to get to that particular point, right? And it's not so much like I may go and buy the car right now. I can probably afford to go and buy the car right now, but it's not so much the final product that matters, but it's actually the struggle that you have to get there, and the satisfaction that you get when you struggle to get there and you actually achieve your goals, right?
Correct.
So
Yeah.
I think once you get to a certain level of fame, everything just comes way too easy for you. Like if I want to go and buy, like if I have like, I don't know, $5-10 million in my bank account, and I can go and buy a Lamborghini, I can go and buy it if I want to.
Yeah.
There's no, and I can have fun with it for a few days or a few months or whatever, and then it's just going to be novelty will wear off, right? So I
Yeah.
think it's important that you've done that
Yeah. But
you've
also,
attained that.
I haven't. So, like I said, my career really happened by accident. So
Hmm.
um, sorry, it's lost train of thought. But yeah, I was saying my career happened by accident. But also, I'm not, like I said, I'm not someone who wanted to be like popular, who wanted to like be famous. I think if these are things you're after, then I think you kind of experience the dip because you're more aware of like, oh shit, I'm now this famous person, and oh my god, now my fame is wearing away or whatever. But I think if you're more focused on the thing that you're actually doing, and maybe fame comes in as like a part and parcel of the job. Like say for actors I think are like the most public figures. Like it's kind of fame for them is kind of like by default. If you act in anything, people see it, just like you're famous, right? So I don't think that. Uh, I think that if you're trying to aspire for fame, and then if it kind of fades and stuff, then you really feel the effect of these things in your life. But I think if you're
Right.
more rooted in the craft that you're doing or the thing that you love, and fame happens to just be maybe like a bonus thing, then you don't really feel that so much. That's just my take on it.
And I think that, and that's actually really true, because if you are truly passionate about something, then you're going to devote your full 100% to that, right? And whatever else comes along with it is just sort of bonus,
Yeah,
right?
because if you look at my career compared to a lot of other singers in the industry, in the Indian film industry, I'm not someone who's done a great body of work. Like I'm not someone who's singing a song every single year.
Hmm.
And in fact, after a really long time, I sang a couple of songs just last year. There was a huge break. But I'd rather be doing like few things that are really, things I'm passionate about than just churning out stuff for the sake of like,
Yeah,
I have to make sure that I
I
give
know what you
somebody
mean.
a hit number. I've never been
And
that
be
person.
relevant, essentially.
Be
Yeah,
relevant and all of that.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I know there are a lot of people who, I mean, I get a lot of messages from like fans and stuff, and they're always waiting for the next thing. But I've never chased this. Like, I've just not been someone who goes after, like, I don't know. I'm not, in a sense, I'm not very ambitious. I am passionate. Like, I love being in the
Yeah.
studio. I get a great, like, kick out of doing what I do. I love it. But I think, like I said, very early on, I kind of was very aware of what I wanted from it. I knew that I didn't want to lose myself. It's very easy to lose yourself in when you're doing something that is so receptive on like to a larger audience in that
Mm-hmm.
sense. So I was very clear, and there was a point definitely when I felt insecure. Like, I'm like, oh my god, you know what? I'm not doing as much work as say my colleagues. Maybe I should be, maybe I should change the style, like the way I sing, so that I can do
Mm-hmm.
more work. And then I stopped myself. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Like, you're going to like change who you are in your core just so that you can fit in. Like, really think about this. And I took,
Mm-hmm.
and this is, I think, especially for someone whose career starts off really young. I think these are questions that naturally come up. And I just remember being very, like, taking the time to think about it and being like, you know what, no, don't give in to that fear. Don't succumb to this pressure of expectation. Just be authentic and, stick to what you're doing. Even if you get like one song in the year, but at least that one song will be so unique to you that people will remember
Quality
it.
over quantity, right?
Yeah,
After all.
exactly. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's really worked in my favor because today, if I get called for a project, I know people, they really like, I have a certain identity, like my voice has a very unique thing to it, and I know that that is something that I bring to the table, whether I'm doing an ad or whether I'm doing a film. Like, when directors call me, they always say, we want that voice. So for me, that's important, more
Exactly.
than
It's the
just turning
uniqueness, right? I mean, you see a lot of these directors who just churn out movies like
up.
every time. And then
Yeah.
you have someone like, I don't know, let's say Quentin Tarantino,
Exactly.
who has made like about 8 or 9 movies in his entire career, but each one of them are so unique in their own regard that like you
Exactly.
remember each and every one of them, right?
Yeah,
So
and he has such a unique characteristic to the way he makes his films. Like, you just
exactly.
know it's a Tarantino movie when you watch it, right?
Yeah, yeah. I
So
love
I'd
his
rather be
movies.
remembered. Yeah, I just watched the one with Brad Pitt and Leo. What's it called?
Oh, Once Upon a Time in
Once Upon a
Hollywood.
Time in Hollywood. Yeah, that's the
That
best.
was a funny movie.
So fun. But yeah, so that's exactly my point. And in fact, just today I was watching this actually quite hilarious interview between Denzel Washington and Jamie Foxx, and
Hmm.
he, Jamie Foxx asked him, like, what's your take on like social media and all of these actors who are constantly posting about their work and stuff. So he said, he said, I just feel like if you keep on drinking too much water, you kind of drown. And it's like a good actor's work is measured. How do you say on good actor's work is measured? He said that your work speaks for itself, like not your popularity.
Hmm.
Your work should speak for itself, and there should be an element of mysteries. Like, it's important to do like maybe 1 or 2 movies, you know, in a gap of a few years, and people can't wait to watch what you're doing next instead of you being in the limelight all the time and people get saturated with
Hmm.
your work. So so yeah, I think it's important to trust that part of yourself and know, okay, yeah, you do have something unique to offer, and not constantly like feeling the need to do like
You
5,000
you
things.
seem you seem really enlightened. I mean, like in the sense that you seem to have this understanding and a very good balance in your life. How
Well,
did you
yeah.
manage to get to this particular point to where you are at this point?
So for me, by nature, I've always been someone who questions everything.
Hmm.
Like, from the time, like, I can remember from the time I was 3 or 4, I remember questioning everything, and I'm very fortunate to have grown up with a set of parents who have sort of encouraged it. And even if my parents didn't encourage something, I always challenge. I'll always be like, but why not? Or I was, I always made sure that I found my own answers about any scenario or anything in my life. So I think constantly questioning things, also going through certain life experiences, understanding on a not on a what is the word for it, like on a trying to understand from a bigger
Macro,
perspective
yeah,
instead
on a
of like
macro
just,
level, yeah.
yeah, exactly,
Hmm.
has really
Looking at
helped
the
me
big
get to
picture, I
this.
guess.
Always, like, I think, I don't know why, it's just my, it's not like someone taught me that. I think it's just the way I am.
It, yeah, I can
So
relate to that because I'm much the same way as you in that regard, that I prefer taking a very balanced perspective on things. I mean,
yeah,
it takes two hands to clap. There are two sides to every
exactly,
coin, right?
exactly.
So I completely agree with that
Mm.
wavelength of thinking, really. I mean, it's what led
Yeah.
you to where you are today. I mean, and the fact that you're not someone who seeks popularity, but also you're someone who follows their passion. I think that is really really commendable, and
Thank you.
es- especially after last week, and after hearing you on Instagram talk about the tragic passing of Sushant Singh, and the way you spoke about that and with your experiences and all of that. I was wondering if you could touch a little bit more on. So you spoke about going into therapy and how it's viewed as a taboo,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And in today's day and age, and people usually talk about their physical health, but not so much their
yes,
mental health. And that
exactly.
is a very interesting argument, a very interesting perspective that you brought up, because quite frankly, like I never actually realized that before, but there is this taboo. So I was wondering if you could talk more about your experience with therapy and what made you want to get into it.
Okay. So, okay, this first of all like a huge like backstory to why I ended up doing therapy, but
Hmm.
I will kind of try and briefly run you through that. So from the age of 15 till I was 29 till last year, before August, I had been going through a series of life experiences. Like life happened, but just for me personally, each experience had such um, deep lessons to be learned. So the experiences, in my opinion, were very difficult for me emotionally. And by, like I said, by nature, I'm someone who always tries to look at the larger picture, and I always try to stay strong through everything. I have the sort of mentality where if something happens to you, either you let that thing define you and take over your life, or you decide to define it in your own way, grow from it, and sort of push through in life. And I think I used to pride myself a lot in being strong. So I always pushed myself. I'm not going to give into being I don't want to go into a state of like being a victim. I don't want to
Victim.
feel like I'm somebody who, can't get back up on her feet. And I think also a lot of my this sort of fire in me to be this very independent, strong woman comes from seeing my mom. Like I've seen her go through certain things in her life, and I think being around her has always made me want to be sort of like I never wanted her to worry about me. Let me put it that
Hmm.
way. So I really pushed through a lot of things. So when I was 16, actually when I was in college with you only, I went through sexual abuse, and it lasted for 5 years. And it was somebody my family knew, and it just was a very
Unlucky
traumatic
time.
experience.
Hmm.
Yeah, it was a very traumatic experience. In fact, that is one of the biggest reasons why I was so introverted in college, and I was very sort of, I don't remember, kind of weird.
Yeah,
But
I would say, yeah, you were introverted in college. I remember we used to hang out.
yeah,
You were quiet. You
yeah,
were very quiet.
yeah.
Hmm.
So if people knew me before the abuse, like I was into sports, I was like always very outgoing, very confident kid in school, extremely certain of myself. And somewhere I kind of lost that in that span of 5 years, because also I was very isolated when that incident happened to me. Um, so after that, for whatever reason, something helped me get out of that situation. I got out of it. Then I had to go through the experience of sort of I had to reintegrate back into society because I was so isolated. I couldn't remember what it was like to make a conversation. Like so all the
Correct.
little spaces in between your relationships with people, like all the unseen things that play a role in dynamics with people. So like chemistry, for example, just like, chemistry between two
Hmm.
people is what leads for them to have a conversation or whatever it is. So those things I wasn't able to understand once I got out of that situation. So reintegrating back on my own, this is like before therapy, and I didn't
Hmm.
tell anybody. I mean, my family knew about what had happened, but I just decided to take it upon myself to,
This was like
like, I'm the
2012,
only.
2013, around that time.
This was in 2011 or 12, yeah.
Hmm.
So yeah, around that time. And I'm like, I'm the only person who can help myself at the end of the day. Like, even if I go to at that point, I'm like, even if I go to a therapist, finally it boils down to me having to do the work on myself, right? So I just focused on getting myself back into society, meeting people. Like, I joined a dance class because I want to get rid of my anxiety and fear. And I just literally threw myself into the deep end in a sense. And then there were some other experiences after that also, just in terms of learning about people you can trust, friendships, betrayal, loyalty, all of that kind of thing. But it weighed very hard on me, and I think the last 15 years for me have really helped me relearn a lot of things about myself, but also really come into my own as a person. And the effect of the abuse more than anything was also I had physical effects of the abuse, like my body experienced trauma. Like it releases trauma. Your muscles store trauma in the body. So I had facial paralysis on one side. I had to have
Really?
surgery because I had, yeah.
I didn't
So
know
once
this.
you, yeah. If your body holds any sort of trauma, any sort of stress, and you acknowledge that stress, the physical body actually starts to release the emotional stress in physical form. So I had a cyst that had to be surgically removed. Once I recovered from that surgery, it took me a month. The week that I recovered from that surgery, I got hit with facial paralysis on my right side.
Wow.
And it was Bell's palsy, which apparently is as common as getting a cold.
Hmm.
And then, but in my case, my doctor told me that it was so serious that if my face that didn't start twitching, like your muscles need to start moving within a time frame. He's like, if it doesn't move in a week, please consider this permanent. So I was just like,
Wow, he
okay,
wasn't messing around.
it was like, yeah, it was, he's a
Yeah.
neurosurgeon. I'm sure he wasn't messing. And he just said that to me. And just throughout all of this stuff, there were so many things I had discovered about myself. And it really was. I mean, now when I look back, I was pushing myself so hard to constantly be like on top of it. Like one of the
Where did the
lessons I learned.
strength? Where did the strength come from?
So this is exactly, you don't realize how much strength you have until you're put through something like that. And like for me, I have, like I said, I have this nature where I always try to see the larger picture, always try to take a lesson from anything bad that happens. That's, I think, just my survival personality.
Hmm.
So even when my
Hmm.
paralysis happened, instead of panicking and be like, oh my God, my whole life is going to end and who's going to look at me? Like one lesson I learned from it is that I'm not really attached to my physicality. Like within a week I was out and like I didn't care how people looked at me, and it was whatever.
Hmm.
Anyway, your physical body is going to change at some point. So I learned that about myself. I learned you start becoming more receptive and you really become intuitive to how people are perceiving you, and it's kind of crazy, like how sensitive you become. And also my thing was like, okay, if I can't sing, what am I going to do next? So that's how I discovered my makeup. I'm also a makeup artist professionally, so I discovered that side. So there's so much good that has always come from anything crazy that's happened in my life, and that's just my nature to always look for the
The
good
good,
in everything.
the silver
Yeah, so
lining. Yeah,
the
yeah.
silver lining, yeah, as they say. And last year, finally, I think I done enough, and I just began to notice things like my ability to feel in any situation. Like say if there was a situation that I knew I was supposed to feel really happy, or like if someone cracked a joke and I knew like in the past I would have laughed like with my whole heart, that I was not. And the one trip especially really bothered me when I went to Uttarakhand, and I was surrounded by like spectacular views and like these
The
snow-clad
beauty.
mountains and
Yeah,
stuff. Yeah,
yeah.
and I just wasn't feeling the impact of it. And that really bothered me. It bothered me so much, and I'm like, okay, there's something really not okay.
What
Like
happened at that time at Uttarakhand when you said, like, when you couldn't feel all of this beauty and stuff?
So I just think that I had reached a point where I had fought so hard to always stay mentally strong throughout all my
Hmm.
experiences,
Hmm.
and it was just fatigue, just mental fatigue, and I began to recognize it. And after that trip, I also felt so like I needed to make some decisions for myself, and I went. I did a trip to Canada, and Canada's stunning. I'm sure
Really,
you
which
know.
part?
So I toured. I went all over actually. So my brother got married last year in August, and we
Oh,
were
okay.
in we were in Ottawa. Wedding was there. Then we went to Banff. Then went to Vancouver. Did we go to
Dude, I
Vancouver?
was in Vancouver.
Yeah, but I didn't. We were
I'm
not
in.
in touch then. I'm
Yeah.
sure I'd have met you if I had I known.
It's all right.
But
It's all right. I'm
we
just
talked
messing
very
with you.
briefly. No, I swear I would
Yeah.
have like figured out
It's
where
cool.
you
Don't
were.
worry about it.
But I'll be go back anyway. My brother lives there now, so let's see. But yeah. So even while I was on that trip, I was not able to feel a lot of things, like the beauty of the place and stuff. So once I came back, and there were some other things that happened on that trip, and my mom came up to me one evening and one day, and she said, "Okay, I know you're upset. Like, what's going on with you?" And I told her whatever had happened in the last month, and then but she saw past just that one incident, and she just came to me and she put her hand on my like knee, kind of like motherly love sort of.
Yeah, yeah.
And she just said, "You know what? Like, she said, I know you're dealing with like a lot more than what you're showing. I just know." And I just broke down. Like, it was the first time where I felt like finally someone can see, like, oh my God, I've been dealing with so much. And I think I just allowed myself to breathe. I literally remember that feeling of like doing, and I could feel the weight drop off, and
Mm-hmm.
just kind of recognizing how strong I had been through everything. And that finally kicked in. Like, I didn't realize how tired I was. Like, I did not realize how tired I was until that moment happened. And also, yeah, like I think I recognized that being strong and healing yourself are two very different things. I think you heard me say that in that talk as well.
Correct.
And I think in that moment I realized, like, okay, wow, you know what? I just have been strong, and being strong, the effects of being strong through everything was me starting to feel numb about other parts of my life, like not being able to feel. So then I decided to do therapy. My mom said, I think you need to do therapy, and I think it will be good for you. And the funny thing is, I had been contemplating therapy on my own. Like, I internally
Mm-hmm.
was like, I really think I need to go to a therapist.
Mm-hmm.
And I think once mom said it, and I knew I needed it, I was like, okay, you know what, I'm ready. And I think that when you do decide to do therapy, if anybody does decide to do it, you have to feel ready to do it. Like, you might know you need it, but there's a point in yourself, you will feel like a shift in you where you're like, okay, I think I'm okay to do it now. So I think it's okay if you take your time, but be open to that process. It's not as crazy as it seems. And yeah, that's when I decided to go in, and it was the best thing I did for myself. And I know it was good because all of the other like all my emotions were so imbalanced and so off that once I did the therapy, I was able to start feeling a lot of stuff in life again.
Mm-hmm.
I was not so numb anymore. Yeah.
Going into therapy, I know for a fact. So at least, so there's a big difference in between Canada and India as far as people going to therapy is concerned. Over here, it's a lot more open, and it's a lot more, the culture is a lot more, how should I say, respectful of when
Mm.
someone goes to therapy, and people don't usually pry or say anything as such. But in India, there seems to be some sort of taboo around going to therapy, right? People, at least there's a perception that people will look at you differently or treat you differently because you are someone who goes to therapy.
Yeah.
How was it? How was it? How was your? You said you were thinking of going to therapy before your mom actually brought up the subject. Was that something that held you back, or was it something else?
No, that wasn't something that held me back. Also, because I'm not really somebody who bases, like, I'm not someone who bases my life on what other people think. I've never been that person. And finally, at the end of the day, I think, you're the only person living your life, and you have to take care of you. People will keep on talking, and people talk when things are bad. I've seen that, or people will talk when things are really great, but when you really need people around, when shit's like really going down, no one really turns up. So I've realized not to really bother about what somebody else is going to say, because that opinion will last for like maybe 5 seconds, and then it fades away. Like, no one's really
Correct.
bothered. But no, like you asked me, no, that's not something that held me back. And yeah, you are right that there is a huge. I think I wouldn't say it's a taboo. I just think people don't have an understanding of what it is.
Hmm.
And like I said, like you heard me speaking last time, that when it comes to your physical health, it's a very visible thing. Like, even when you go to like a hospital or any medical space, seeing illness of the body and stuff is very, it's sort of more in the open, let me put it that way, at
Correct.
least here.
It's more
but
visual, right?
it's more visual, right? And but mental health is not something you actually see. You don't necessarily, I mean, yes, there are some people who might see the physical effects of really
Mm-hmm.
serious mental cases, like mental health
Mm-hmm.
cases, but for the most part, mental health is not something that you detect very easily in a person, especially if it's something that is maybe not as out of control. And I don't mean that disrespectfully to anyone who's going through something tough,
Mm-hmm.
but it's less visible. And I think I know that one of the fears I faced was like I didn't know what to expect because there was no reference, like there was nothing visible for me to know what it would be like, what is the environment like
Correct.
when you do help and stuff. So once I decided to do the therapy and I was guided towards the first therapist, the one thing that I would say is go with your feeling, trust your gut feeling. And I'm someone who's always gone by my gut instinct in my life. So something doesn't feel good to me, I always use the word resonance. If it doesn't resonate with who you are as a person, then don't go and force yourself to sit there. And I think that first, the first therapist I went to didn't, like, I just didn't vibe with the person at all. Even the kind of therapy I went for was,
Mm-hmm.
I think, a psychoanalyst or something like that. And the approach is very different from the latter who I'm going to talk about. So that kind of therapy didn't agree with me, and then I went to a cognitive behavior analyst,
How many
which
kinds
was
of
the second.
therapy are there?
So there are multiple. So that's what I'm coming to. So I didn't even
Mm-hmm.
know that when you have certain, like when you're dealing with any mental, fatigue or whatever, there are different kinds of therapy available depending on what you're going through, and you can choose. There's a huge space to choose from. So that fear in me kind of subsided, and I realized a lot of the fear came from not knowing. And had I not trusted my own feeling and my own gut, I would have thought like, oh, the first therapist is the only kind of therapy and I'm supposed to go through this thing, and it would have probably gone down a very different path. I would probably turn out like a very weird, like, person. And yeah, because it can be a very traumatic experience. It's kind of because I think also when you go and you are afraid you're going to discover a certain part of yourself you're not ready to face. Like suppose a
Correct.
therapist says, listen, you know what, you have so and so mental disorder or something. It's a very scary thing to
To
face,
come to terms with,
to
yeah.
come to terms with. And I also think it has a lot to do with sometimes how mental health has been portrayed in the media and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We don't actually encounter people who are going through it very openly for us to gain clarity or to gain transparency on the subject. We see like a very dramatic interpretations of it in movies and stuff. So everyone thinks like, oh my god, if I go into they'll probably put me in a psych ward and a straight jacket and pop some pills. It's not always
Mm-hmm.
like that, and it's not like that. Like that's like a really extreme
Extreme
case,
case. Yeah, yeah.
And again, not to be disrespectful for anyone who's gone through that experience, there are,
Mm-hmm.
like I said, different stages. And yeah, there are I think the key is to just trust your feeling. If the therapist feels good, the resonance and the vibe of the therapist feels good, then that is probably what is good for you. And I always recommend going to therapy or finding a therapist through someone through someone who's been through an experience, so someone you trust, basically. That's always my advice on something like this. And I think now, though, I have to say, especially since Deepika Padukone talked about it so openly, and she's a celebrity of like the highest
One
degree,
of the
she's like the
high.
biggest
Yeah, yeah.
actress, and she talked about medication. She's on medication. She was, at least, I can't speak for her right now, but she was on medication. And I think sometimes as a society, when there's medication involved with mental health, it's looked at more like, oh my god, something's really wrong with this person. But it's not supposed to be viewed like that. The whole attitude needs to be as though you would heal any other physical part of your body, like if you got a cut or something. Like if you
Mm-hmm.
had fractured a bone, you'd go and your doctor would cut you open, give you the right treatment, and then put you on medication to heal that part of you. But the brain is also a part of your physicality, and also the what do you call it? The thought processes involved because of it are also part of the health of the mind, for sure. So it's yeah, I just think that whole idea of it being scary and it being a negative thing needs to change, and it is changing. It is definitely changing.
Yeah, it does seem to be, things do seem to be taking a turn, I feel. And I think one of the benefits of social media as well is the fact that it's given people a platform to express themselves better. So, regardless of all the crap that you see on social media and stuff, you also have people who willingly share their experiences, right? And there could be someone else who's probably having the same experience or a very similar experience to you, and you never know how that might affect them, right? Maybe what you're seeing
Exactly.
right now, maybe it would motivate someone to get into therapy, right? And to and to avoid looking at that stigma associated with it and stuff. In
In
fact, you
fact,
said, mhm, continue.
go ahead.
No.
You say.
You in your Instagram video, you said something which really resonated with me. You said, when people look at, this is something I think you must have learned in therapy. I don't know if I may be wrong. You can correct me if I'm wrong. But you said when people look at when people look at their emotions and stuff, they probably see it in one color. Like you mentioned, red, right?
Yeah.
But you have all these other little colors as well. But you only see red, right?
Yeah.
So I was wondering if you could go a little bit more into that and regulating your emotions and all, because I think that is something which is really interesting.
Okay. Okay. So, like I said, when I did the Uttarakhand trip, I was so numb,
Hmm.
and and when I went into therapy, when I brought up that part of my experience, my therapist said, she's like, it doesn't necessarily mean you're not feeling what you think you're not feeling.
Hmm.
And I didn't understand why she said that to me in the beginning, but I'm assuming she's had other clients or patients that have gone through similar
Hmm.
things. And it was there was this very beautiful moment where, after maybe a couple of sessions or three or four of them, I can't remember how far into therapy, that I was on a trip with my friends, and it was a very sensitive time. Like I really needed my friends around me. I needed a support system, so we went on this big ass trip. And I was sitting in front of a lake. It was this beautiful lake, and I was on my own. And I just remember having this. I didn't realize this was happening to me, but I just had this. Like, what is this feeling? I'm feeling something that I've not felt in a long time. And I just remember, like, suddenly recognizing that I was able to feel and experience the place. Like, I was like in awe of the beauty of the place. And I just remember saying to myself, like, oh my God, like, you know what, this is this is a huge moment, because this goes to show that there was something really off in my emotional balance. Like, and when I kind of thought about it, I'm like, why am I feeling this now? And I have not felt it for so long. I just realized that the few sessions of therapy really helped me release a lot of things in my life. So I also released a lot of the emotional attachment or the emotions that were pertaining to those situations. So, like I said, the way I tried to explain it was, if this was a painting, and say you are feeling maybe grief, or the effects of your trauma or something, those emotions are running so loud in the background. Like, the color of that painting is only red, but all the other emotions that you're feeling, they can't be felt, because everything, like, this one set of
It's
emotions is just
obscuring
running
it.
so high. Yeah. So that moment when I could feel my surroundings again and really experience that place like a kid would, like, literally every little thing was like, wow. I realized that there was such a huge imbalance, and it doesn't mean that you're not feeling everything else. It's just that one um,
It's
spectrum
so
of emotions
dominant.
is much, exactly, the word is dominant. That's what I'm looking for.
Mhm.
Yeah, one spectrum of emotions is so dominant in your emotional space that you don't realize that you're missing out on other stuff. So a lot of people who are feeling like, oh my God, life is not so exciting anymore, these are things you should be paying attention to. You should be feeling your life as though a child would feel, be excited about like a new toy, or that's how you should be feeling. That, I think, that is actually a great reference point for your emotional health. So if you're feeling like you're sort of dull in some areas emotionally, you should probably be asking yourself, why is that so, it's
Mhm.
probably because something else is running really loud in the background.
Mhm.
So yeah.
For me, one of the things that, so when I was younger, I used to struggle a lot with regulating my emotions, and particularly anger was one emotion that I would feel a lot. I was an angry kid, like, way back. This is like, I think this is even before I met
That's
you.
why I was going to
Probably.
make a joke now, but
No, but I don't know. Maybe it was in Xavier's as well. I don't know. It was such a long time ago. But um, a lot of times, like I would make decisions in anger, and it's a very good example to give, because when you're making decisions in anger, you're obviously not thinking clearly, right? You're not
yes.
thinking. You're not thinking in the right frame of mind, and then later on, you might regret what you said or what you did at that point in time. So I guess after all of these years, I personally have gone for maybe one session of therapy. This was in 2012 because of a family issue,
Mm.
um, and I learned a lot in that session, in terms of how to regulate my emotions and all of that. Unfortunately, I didn't go for more. I should have gone for more, but just going through that one session has taught me so much more about how to regulate my anger, and how
Mm.
to regulate any of my emotions for that matter. And it's put me in a place at this point in time where I feel like I can make a solid decision without having to let the emotional baggage take dominance over that. And I think it's very important. And your description and metaphor of colors hits the nail in the head, like,
I hope I explained that
realistically speaking.
properly here.
No, you did. I mean,
Okay,
like,
yeah.
it because when I initially heard that point on the Instagram story, on your Instagram post, I was like, oh, that's actually a very nice way of putting it. So
Hmm.
I kudos. It was definitely good. But coming back to the mental health side of things, what would you have any do you have any advice for someone who's going through a mental state, or any particular mental state right now, and is considering therapy? I know you said that find a therapist who's recommended to you and all of that, but do you have
Yeah.
any sort of other advice for someone who's considering going to therapy, like, just from your experiences, what can they expect out of it, what they should bring in, things like that, really?
So first of all, I'd say don't be afraid. Okay, like really try not to be afraid, because your fear is going to get in the way of maybe you making the best decision for yourself, and that going with how things feel good to you. So if you can keep your fear aside, it's not like that's something I would try and encourage the person who's considering it. And I would also say make sure you have a really trustworthy set of friends and family, people you can talk to after each session. I think that is very important to reflect what you
Hmm.
have gone through. Like I confided only in my brother and my mom, and maybe one friend of mine after each session, just to reflect, and it really helped. You need to have a safe space, because sometimes going into therapy, if you don't feel like you have a support system around you outside of the therapist, can make you feel a little isolated, and you're in a very you're in a healing space with yourself, so you might overthink things. So it's nice to have people on the outside who are there to ground you if you're sort of taking off, also a little bit over analyzing, like, oh my god, what if this is wrong with me and my therapist said this to me. So have a make sure you have a solid support system. And when you're working with your therapist, I would also say, um, like, don't panic. Like, if say you, I think you should also be prepared sometimes to hear things about yourself that you're not ready to hear. Like, say if just saying, if say you go into this session and you are told that you have a sort of imbalance. Say if you're told you're bipolar, for example, don't approach it as like, oh shit, my whole life is full. I don't know, it's like I'm a crazy person. Like, no, you're there to understand a certain aspect of yourself so that you can approach it in the healthiest way possible. And don't look at it as you're a broken person or something that needs fixing. Look at it as something that needs nurturing and care,
I
so
think
that
that's
it doesn't
important.
get, yeah. And don't look at it as something that's going to get worse or something like that. You're
Hmm.
there to take care of a part of yourself that you don't want it to get worse. So you're doing it because you love yourself. You're doing it because you want to nurture that part of yourself that could maybe get
Yeah,
more
I
difficult
think
in future.
that is very important. So there was this
Yeah.
book that I was reading some time ago called The 12 Rules for Life. And one of the rules was to compare yourself to who you were yesterday and not to who someone else is today. So And I think that is very beautifully said, because
Mm.
a lot of times we tend to compare ourselves to others. Oh, he's doing this well, and she's doing that well, and why can't I do this when she's doing that, or he's doing this,
Right.
and that's where things get problematic, because everyone has had different experiences in their past which led them up to that particular point. And
Mm.
you're never gonna compare yourself to someone and have an exact 1-to-1 ratio. Right?
Exactly.
There's always going to be differences between you and another person. So
Absolutely.
the best way that you can go about in bettering yourself is to always compare yourself to what you were in the past to what you are right now, and how much you have grown from that.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
think what you said is of paramount importance, really.
Well, I hope so. I really hope that it helps somebody. And I was going to say earlier that, yeah, when I did that Instagram post and stuff, like I also, because of what happened with
Hmm.
Sushant Singh Rajput, uh, I was so upset. I couldn't believe that someone of someone that I hadn't personally ever met, but just from the little bit I saw of him, I just the vibe, you can gauge. I
Correct.
just knew he was a very lovable, like very loving, innocent sort of. So maybe somebody who is more impacted and more sensitive, and sometimes this industry can be really cruel, like it can be very harsh, especially on actors. I think they're so in the limelight. Like 5 seconds you're like famous, and then the next 2 seconds somebody completely
Correct.
dismisses you,
Correct.
and that's sort of a culture that we just think it's okay to say what we forget that they're human
That they are
beings at the
human
end of the
beings
day,
as well. Yes, exactly.
absolutely, like, and we think it's okay because it's part of this culture of films where you just say I like the film or I don't like this, but we need to
Hmm.
start being more sensitive, because if people really knew what an artist or anybody creative or anybody who's working, not even on not someone necessarily creative, is going through on a regular, you start you'll be more compassionate and you think twice before you say stuff. So,
Hmm.
like, one thing I stopped really early on was making fun of people. Like, I know I joke. I told you earlier I'd make fun of you a little bit, but
You can make
even
fun
when
of
I
me.
do,
It's fine.
no, but I tell you something. Uh, when I was in school and I was going through this really tough time, like when I was 15 and in school, and people used to say stuff, they didn't even know what I was dealing with. And I used to break down and I used to cry, and I lost a lot of friends because I couldn't tell them what was happening,
Correct.
and they never understood why I had become that way. So after that, after going through my own little thing, I understood that what, every little thing you say, you just don't know what that person is going through. You don't
Hmm.
know what that kid or that whatever adult, whoever, it doesn't matter what age you are, you
Hmm.
never know what they're going through. You might joke about somebody's hair, but you don't know on what level that thing might actually be bothering that
Correct.
person. So
Correct.
I don't take joking about someone lightly, and if at all, I make sure it's in a way that is not, like, I just
That's
try and make sure it's in a way that is very like
not
sweet,
offensive.
and yeah, because you really don't know, something that might seem so small to you might be something so big to somebody else.
Correct.
And
Correct.
so I think people need to be a little more conscious of that as well, and I see that a lot in like our youngsters and stuff. They kind of tease somebody who doesn't, like, they're hanging out and they say, yeah, I do just like that, but I'm like, this kid is laughing right now, but when he goes home he's probably experiencing something on a deeper level. I knew that happened to me, like that was happening. So I think yeah, point being, sorry, coming back to Sushant Singh and his death, and I was so emotional that day, and I just, said to myself, you know what, I'm someone who's actually gone through some experience in when it comes to therapy and stuff. I need to talk about it because it's bigger than whatever I think.
Yeah.
If it's going to damage my career, people don't want to work with me on this crap. Like,
Mhm.
it's so much bigger than that. That finally, at
And
the end of the day, all of us are.
I think that's what's so unique about you as compared to many of the others that I have seen.
I don't
I'm
think
not
so.
no
Everyone talks about
no
problems in their own way.
no, I know, but here's the thing with you is that you are not afraid to put yourself out there regardless of whatever the consequences you feel might have. And a lot of people hold themselves back from saying things because they feel that there are people who are going to judge them or say things about them or ruin their career or ruin their life or whatever, but you're not afraid of that, and that is very commendable.
Thank you. I think that that comes from actually not, like I said, not being so attached to fame, not being so attached to, uh, in a sense, the material things. Like, I'm not. I should probably be afraid because the only way I make my living is through my music and my makeup and stuff. But you know what? I realized, uh, especially when Deepika spoke about her experience, that I never for 1 second felt like in fact, I loved her even more for doing that. And I think people, we are connected through our commonality, to the common feelings of pain and joy.
Exactly. It's
And I just feel like
relatable.
we talk more about on social media, and everyone showing how
Mhm.
happy they are. They're never talking about how depressed or how sad they are, and it's become sort of like, oh my god, it's, you feel guilty for having a bad day. You know what I mean? Like, I know
Mhm.
people who are like, oh, my friends are doing so well. I don't even think I can call and tell them that I'm having a bad day. You know,
Correct.
so
Hmm.
I do think it's important to rather reassure people that yeah, as much as you are going through something, even I am going through something. No matter what kind of life I'm living with, it,
Hmm.
whatever. And that day when I spoke up, I had like at least 3-4 people write to me after that and say like, thank you so much for talking about it so openly, because we've been contemplating therapy for a long time, and at least now, and they're like, we have our support system, we just didn't know what to expect because there's literally no visual of what that space is going to be like, and you
Correct.
talking about it has helped me at least consider it. So I'm like really happy, even if it helped one person to
Hmm.
build the strength and to just little bit of confidence and courage to go into that space. And I think
It makes you relatable, I think.
yeah,
It makes
and
you very relatable. And I think that's
yeah,
what
it
people
is.
like. That's what people
Yeah,
like, is
like
that when you can.
I know that's what I love. Like when I meet a personality, or I've
Hmm.
met any people who are like a big deal in life.
Hmm.
Like I've always, the thing that connects me to them is the fact that we have a common set of emotions or a common set of experiences. I think that is more important than like your fame and how many cars you have and all that stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I used to work at the Taj after I graduated from Xavier's. I was there from 2011 to 2014, and during my time over there, I've met a ton of celebs, like
Yeah,
Bollywood, Hollywood,
Hollywood. Yeah,
diplomats, all kinds of people. One of the people that actually really stood out to me was Kanye West, out of everyone else. Now Kanye has this image in people's minds of being a complete weirdo, and does all these crazy antics, and now he's a man of God, and he used to make all kinds of rubbish music and stuff. And people have this sort of image in their heads, but when you actually meet the guy in person, he was such a sweet guy. Like, he was just so kind, and he was just so, how should I say,
yeah,
and I use that word human because at that point in time when I was working at the Taj, I wasn't all that, world, how should I say, world minded and all of that,
yeah,
so I didn't really perceive celebrities as being humans. But when you actually go and meet someone in person, you're like, oh, this guy is just a regular guy.
yeah,
He's a nice guy. But
yeah,
what you see in the media is so different, because you're seeing a very watered down, one dimensional version of a person. And I think
exactly.
after my experience working at this place, I came to realize that, ultimately these people might be entertainers. They might
They
be they
might
might
be.
be entertainers. They might be
Yeah,
yeah, right. They entertain you, right? They're celebrities,
yeah,
they're actors and stuff. But ultimately, they're doing this. It's their passion, and they're doing this for a living as well. This is their life. They have their own challenges. They have their own issues at home as well. Just because you're seeing only one side of the coin, and you're seeing what you see on TV, right? They're rolling up in limousines, with
yeah.
bottles of fancy champagne and two women around their arms. I mean,
Mhm.
life is a lot more complex and deep than that.
Yeah,
And I think and
definitely.
I think if there's one thing that I got out of Taj was this, that the fact that we are all human at the end of the day, and we all have our struggles, no matter what our status in society might be.
Okay. I think, yeah, what you're saying is absolutely right. I think, like, fortunately for me, I understood that very early on. So I've never really been like, how when people see a famous person, they react like, oh my God. Very
Mhm.
rarely does that happen to me. Like, very, very
Yeah.
rarely. I probably have reacted that way maybe twice in my life. And even then, it was more because that person was so, uh, the personality was so like
Who is it with, if you don't mind
somebody's
me
work
asking?
that I. So it was Chris Martin. I actually met him.
You met Chris Martin.
Yeah.
Oh my
So
God,
when
that's awesome.
it was the craziest, most amazing thing. So the funny thing about that story is that my brother and I have been huge Coldplay fans for the longest time, and we had been. My brother actually bought tickets to go and see Coldplay in, I think, Canada or somewhere else,
Mm-hmm.
and he never managed to go see them. And I've always wanted to see them, but I've never tried hard to go and see. Like I've not
Yeah,
tried,
yeah.
never. And
Mm-hmm.
then the next thing I got to know is they're coming to India to do the Global Citizen Gig, and I got to know much before, like early on, because I was on tour with Arijit Singh at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So Arijit was the opening act for Global Citizen, so we were given the whole schedule prior. So I knew like
Nice.
a good month in advance, and I'm like, whoa, what is this? Like cold. I was like, no way, they're coming to like India and stuff. This is so cool. So the night before the concert, we were at the Taj, and I knew there was a meet and greet and stuff. And I rarely do this kind of stuff. Like I just don't. But I've always loved him as a person
Mm-hmm.
more than his like career and
Music.
music. It's just
Mm-hmm.
his vibe, the person. He's so like full love energy and like down to earth, and I just love him. And even when I saw him the first time, like there was a commotion because everyone had come for this meet and greet, and like we want to meet this man. And the funny thing is, I went in like my t-shirt and jeans, and I just threw on a pair of boots because like my dad was like, listen, like going to the Taj, you can't like be dressing like you're going to like So I said, okay, I just throw on a pair of boots and all. And I was the only person apart from Chris Martin wearing a pair of jeans and t-shirt. Everyone else came in their diamonds and their saris and their
Oh my
suits
God.
and everything. So it was the craziest thing. And I remember seeing him, and I just remember saying to myself, you know what, it's good. I don't want to go and say anything because what am I going to say? Like everyone's saying the same thing to him. I said, my life is made. Thank you, God, like for this moment. My brother tried to fly across continents to see them, and this guy's come to my very doorstep. So there's definitely like something going on there. Thank you. And then he left, or rather, I saw him being taken away. And in that moment, I realized, like, oh man, you know what? I think I made a big mistake. I should have gone up and at least given him a hug and not said anything. And I just regretted it. I regretted it in that moment. And especially like because my brother and I are really close. I said I should have at least done it for him, if not myself. And then a friend of mine was there, and I said, dude, I made a big mistake, and wish I spoke to him and stuff. And my friend said, what are you saying? He's like, right there, go and talk to him. I'm like, what do you mean he's gone? He's like, no, he's right there. Like, look. And I'm looking and I can't see him. Like, where? I can't see him. He's like, right there. And then there's someone blocking my line of sight, so that's why I couldn't see him. And he's like, look, he's sitting there. And so he was sitting on like the handle of this big couch thing that was on the lawn at the Taj or whatever. And I said, okay, I'm
This is
gonna
by
reach.
the
I know at
poolside, I
least
think, right?
not. No, this was in some like a terrace kind of thing.
Oh, okay. Was this at Mahal or Land's End?
This was at the Taj in town. I don't know what the one
Mahal,
in
probably. Gateway.
no Gateway. Yeah, yeah.
Gateway, yeah, so Mahal.
Gateway.
Okay. Yeah,
So
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
So now I'm like, okay, now I know for sure that this is what I really want to do. And I rarely go up to people and say whatever. So I'm like, okay, now that I know, let me go and do this. I was drinking some nimbu pani or something. Give my dad the glass and I'm doing this. And I walked over, and he was talking to some person, some lady, and I didn't want to interrupt the moment because
Hmm.
obviously it must have been a big moment for us. So I stood like a fair distance away from him,
Mm-hmm.
and I just stood there, and he kind of saw me. Like he said, okay, and he knew. He said, okay, this person's like wanting to talk to me. So he's standing. He was sitting on this handle of the couch or whatever, and he was talking to her, nodding at her, whatever she was saying, and like looking at people. And then he got up and he walked to me, and I was,
Really?
yeah, because he must have thought like, oh, she's not like,
Yeah, she's not
like,
pouncing on me. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, like I was respecting that girl's time and
Face.
whatever. And he
Mm-hmm.
walked over to me and he started talking to me. I was like, something this is happening right now. So that was super like unbelievable. But talking to him, he's just another guy. He was just like, how's your day going and what's
Yeah.
happening? Uh, So fame, I think, in a sense, is such an illusion. It's like the end of the day,
Mm-hmm.
they go home to their kids and they also take a shit at the end of the day. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, they want to stay, man.
That is
Really,
so
it's
true,
about
man.
it is.
That
This
is so
this
true.
beat is it's I don't know,
we hold
famous
these
in more.
celebrities in such a high regard, right, and such a high status and stuff. But at the end of the day, they're just other people, right? They're just trying to
They are there.
make their way in this world and trying to live their own lives and stuff. I don't think people really get that, right? Like, I
No,
mean, it's
no.
just, I don't know. You probably see this a lot more than I do, but
I
uh,
I mean sometimes, yeah. I also noticed that I think the way that the media shows you a person has a lot to do with their fame.
correct.
And it's not them showing you in this way. Like everything you're looking at through television is always edited and it's all glamorized, and they'll show you only the perfect angle of that person, or you know what I mean. But when you
Hmm.
meet them,
Hmm.
like so much of that, I'm sure maybe you experienced when you met Kanye, that there's so much of that filtering that is taken away, and you just see them for what they are. There's no, like,
Then
all
all
this.
these lights and glamour around them, and yeah, I know what you
Exactly,
mean.
exactly, exactly.
The media
So
portrays people in such a way. It's very insensitive at times, the way the media portrays a person
yes,
or celebrity and stuff. I mean, I don't have any particular example off the top of my head at this point, but I mean, I can imagine sitting in that person's shoes, in that celebrity shoes, and watching a news of myself, and
mm,
if they're shit talking me or something, I'd be like, you're just being so speculative at this point in time. You're making these
yeah,
assumptions about me and stuff, and I can somewhat empathize with how these actors and actresses and musicians feel. So
yeah.
yeah. But wow, I think we've spoken for about a little over an hour right now. That's
Really?
awesome. Yeah, we've
Damn,
spoken
that's
for a little.
long.
That actually flew by. I thought it was more
Yeah,
half an hour or something.
exactly. That was half an hour. Wow. Okay, that's kick
But that's
ass.
awesome. I mean, I don't want to take much more of your time. I know that you have, it's late over there. It's probably like what, two,
I
two
don't even
o'clock,
know actually.
1:30. I don't know,
It's one
one
o'clock.
o'clock. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't want to take too much of your time. Thank you so much again for doing
Hey
this.
man, anytime.
You know,
I
the,
see, I love talking. I can go on talking. So if there are any other topics you want discussions on, I'm totally down.
yeah,
I'm
we,
totally
we
in.
we'll come on again. I'll bring you
Sure.
on again sometime, probably.
Yeah.
Let's see. But
Like
it's
if you
been.
want to, if you want to call me with when you're doing some talks with some friends and all, like I'm more than happy. I have no
Oh,
problem.
for
Like,
sure, that would be awesome. That would
yeah,
be
like I would.
awesome.
Yeah, totally. Cool.
I mean, yeah, yeah. Like it's nice talking to you and reconnecting with you. It's been like I said, 12 years since we last spoke. Like it's
Yeah.
since we left, since I left Xavier's. I mean, times have changed so much, and it's so nice to see how much you've grown from back then and
You
everything.
too.
Yeah, I mean, I've lost the afro, so there's
Yeah, you
that.
lost the afro, and you're much calmer now. I don't know. There's like something like
Yeah, I'm much
more,
more.
more like
Yeah,
grounded about you, more like
yeah,
certainty in yourself and
yeah. I feel
confidence.
I feel a little more. So one of the reasons why I wanted to have this discussion with you is because a lot of what you said back on that Instagram post really resonated with me. I mean, like what you were saying, I was like, yep, that's true. Yep, that's true. That's definitely true. And I said, I have to talk to you because you and I share so many commonalities in regards to the way we think.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I just wanted to pick your brain and see what else you have in store over there. So,
There's a lot in
but
store.
but yeah, I mean, yeah, I have changed a fair amount since back in Xavier's, and I've changed a lot of the way I've behaved, a lot of the things I've said. Like I've changed so much, and part of that is actually because of my partner as well.
Mm-hmm.
She's in general a very patient and calm person, something which I'm not. So she's my polar opposite.
Amazing.
So yeah, thank God for her and for her staying with me for all this time. I've given her shit. She's gonna listen to this probably and be like, oh, you know.
Aw.
So yeah, right.
Good partner, if you're listening, you're amazing.
Yeah,
And
yeah. Her name's Nikki. She's in
Nikki.
the bedroom.
Okay,
She likes to stay away when I do these things. But yeah,
sweet.
right. Thank you so much, Alyssa, again.
No problem,
I
anytime.
appreciate all of this, and I will definitely call you on again, and
Definitely.
we'll go from there. All right. For the time being, you
Then
take care. Thank
you
you.
do take care.
Cheers.
Just bye.
Bye bye.